Hello everyone, my name is Tom, and today I'll show you how I created a weekly shopping list and recipe app in Streamlit. So I was toying with the idea of creating something like this for a while now, because at home we go to the mall only once a week, and it's really handy if you have everything that you need beforehand, so that you can order it in one go, and everybody is happy afterwards with every night's dinner. When the Finxter challenge for a web app came along, I thought this was the perfect time to combine those things and see what I could make. So, to get started, we need to create a project folder in VS Code, my editor of choice, and afterwards we'll create the basic program structure. I start with the main file, which I'll call shoppinglist.py. Then I also create the db.py file, which will hold all the database logic. And then we need to create a .streamlit folder, which can hold Streamlit config files and secret files. The config is optional, and I won't show it in this video, but the secrets file is something we'll need to store our data database API key securely. We'll come to that later. We can already create a variable name, so we just need to paste in the key afterwards the moment we create it. Once that's done, we can start by installing the dependencies. I'll show each of them on screen, but for me, as I've already installed them, I will get the requirement already satisfied for all the components. If you've never used this before, you should just get a success message that it was installed successfully. After everything is installed, we should now be able to use all the installed dependencies without any problem. To start off, we'll import all the pip packages we'll need. This being Streamlit, the Streamlit option menu, and ISO week. These were all the ones we installed. Afterwards, we also import the Python built-in modules we'll need later, and the database file as DB, because otherwise we can't access it from the main py file. After that, we start with some Streamlit settings. These are not, hey, you can write them in a different manner also, but I prefer this one. The next part is important. The Streamlit page config needs to be called as the first function of your application, so the set page config. If it doesn't do that, or if you don't do that, Streamlit will throw an error. Then the Streamlit config hide part I insert here. It's optional, but it makes the app look nicer and hides the Streamlit um, the Streamlit logo and the Made with Streamlit banner. Afterwards, we can already have a look at our application. It will just show a black window, but with the title and icon we chose to insert. Now the real work can begin. The first thing we'll do is input all the dictionaries we'll need. I'll just copy and paste them, and I propose you do the same from the GitHub repository because this is a lot of typing. In essence, the first one will be used to create the database aspects. The second one will be used to call things from the database because we then just need the keys. And the third and the fourth one will come into play later. You'll see it when we get to it. The period values part will be used to keep track of the current week and make sure it gets updated appropriately afterwards. I'll implement it once we start building that part of the application. Next, we go to the data cloud, which is just data.sh, and registering or logging in is really easy. It should only take you a minute. After that, you'll see something similar to this. The only difference is you probably will only have the default key. We need a project key, which you can use by create by clicking create key. Copy this, it will not be shown again, and please don't bother trying to use mine. It will get deleted before this video gets uploaded. This one we need to paste in the secrets file between quotes. Make sure you do that because otherwise it won't work. I speak from experience. Next, onto the database logic. First thing we need to do is import what we need, so data itself. Pretty print isn't necessary, but it helps to test, and Streamlit because we need access to the streamlit.secrets function. This will initialize the database with our key using the streamlit.secrets function, and then create an aspect, and then create an instance of the database. Creating the bases or the tables we need is as simple as just creating the variable names and calling data.base with that variable name between quotes. If you run the database.py file now, you will have already created those bases, which you can see if you navigate to the data.sh dashboard again. And under bases, you should now have two bases, recipes and SL for our shopping list. Once this is done, we can continue working on the database aspect. First function we'll insert is the enter shopping lists items. This will take a week number, title, and the shopping list. And that's why we need the first dictionary, so it will get inserted correctly. The second one is just calling the built-in data.get method with our period as the key, and it will return that week's shopping list. To update the shopping list, we first use the second dictionary we created in the shopping list items, in the shopping list.py file. That will get populated with items as we click them. I'll show you that later. And then this function will use the week number and that filled out dictionary to iterate over it, and then insert every individual key and its values into the database. To remove an item from the shopping list, we first get the shopping list for that week, and then we get all the items for that item category. Then we use the standard dictionary method remove to remove the single item from that list. The print statements you can just ignore. They are used for troubleshooting and debugging. And after that, we actually create a new line or a new dictionary key value pair. So we have the category as the key and the items minus the one we removed as the values. And we just use that to update the current week or that week's shopping list again. So we actually overwrite it. That's the only way I've found to get it more or less to work. This one took me a long time and a lot of trying. Next, we need to code out the recipe functions. So the second base we created, or table. The first one is just get recipes, which uses the built-in fetch to get everything in that base. We call items to just get the recipes. The second function is enter recipe, which uses a similar layout to the enter shopping list, I think. Yeah, enter shopping list items, and just inserts a dictionary. The primary key or key is the name of the recipe. Then get recipe status is something we'll need to determine if a recipe is in this week's list or just in the general recipe list. You'll see it when we build it out in the Streamlit part. The update recipe status is to change the list it's in, so it just inverts a Boolean value, and that should change if it's shown as this week's recipe or just general recipe. The last one is adding ingredients to shopping list, so it needs to iterate over all the ingredients of a recipe and then add them to the shopping list individually. Something I forgot to mention is that oh, when we're entering the ingredients of a recipe into this week's shopping list, I chose one of the categories, snacks in this instance, but you can choose whatever one. It's something I'll probably remove in the future, the categories, but as the app is currently, that's the best way to get it to work. Okay, on to creating the Streamlit application or building out the Streamlit application further. We first need to insert our navigation menu so that we can choose between the shopping list or the recipes. We'll show that right quick. So now we have two tabs, and behind each of them, we can then implement the functionality that we need. To get Streamlit to work like this, we'll actually implement just two giant if statements and check if they are equal to one of the values from the option menu. So the first if statement will be the current week, and one of the first things we do is implement a header with the dynamic date representation. So what is the current week and from what date to what day does it run? For us, it's always starts on Thursday and ends on Wednesday. You can do whatever you want with this. If you want to change it, you'll need to change the period values also. Next thing we insert is the first column to enter your shopping list items. It will dynamically generate all the categories as you can see here, and then have a text area where you can input your individual shopping list items separated by commas. I'll also remove this one real quick because this line was just for showing what code block would be used for shopping lists and what code block would be used for the recipes. After that's done, we will check if the submit button was clicked, and if so, we will run all the code that needs to be run to add those items to the shopping list of the current week. So first we check if the shopping list for this week already exists. If so, we need to update it. If it does not exist yet, then we need to create it. Mind the string casting I do in the last line of the updates. If you don't do this data, or Streamlit will throw an error because it doesn't accept numbers as keys for the database. So the else statement creates a new list for this week. The once inside it, the logic is more or less the same. So we parse the items we received, we first split them, and then we strip off the spaces, and then we add them as individual items per category for that week's shopping list. Next, we need to enter or insert the second column. Be mindful that you do it at the same indentation as the first, or you will get an error. And it will just show all the items on this week's shopping list. We render them as buttons so that we can click them and on click call the function that will remove them. The UUID function I use here is to make sure that every button has a unique name, because otherwise Streamlit will again throw an error. The second tab now, so the recipes tab. If it's clicked, we create another giant if statement, this time with 3 columns. The first column will hold this week's recipes, the second column will hold the enter your own recipe functionality, and the third column will just hold every recipe in the database that is not in this current week's list. I'm sorry about the very long code here, but there's not really another way to do this. So I'll scroll slowly so you can see it. First thing we do is check if there are any recipes in this week's database, in this week's list. If not, we will throw or show a nice message for everybody. If there are, however, we will render them one by one. We do some layout and then add 2 buttons at the bottom, one to remove the recipe from the current week and another to add the ingredients to this week's list. One thing to note is the onClick functions. They need arguments and you need to add them separately, and they need to be a tuple, even if it's just one. It doesn't work otherwise. The second column is enter your own recipe column, just layout and then submitting the form, because it's a form in all actuality. We also do clear on submit true for that form, as it's nicer if you want to enter multiple recipes one after another. The if submitted functionality is checking and splitting again, so more of the same, and then assigning them to either the title, ingredients, or instructions key as dictionaries, and then entering all of those into the database. The third and final column is the recipe list, so the general list of all the recipes that are not in this week's list. And you can we render them as buttons again, and if you click them, they will get added to this week's list. When all is said and done, you should have something like this and be able to enter items separated by commas. You'll see in a moment that there are recipes in the other tab. That's because it's my version still. Yours will not have any recipes normally, at least not at the start. So after entering a couple of items, we save them. They get shown in the right column. If you click them, they should disappear. Fingers crossed. Okay, that works. And at the recipes, you see I have a couple of them already. We'll enter our own recipe. Let's just make eggs and bacon. For that, we need some eggs, some bacon, and I think pepper and salt. I also realize I forgot butter or oil, but well, you can add it yourself. For the instructions, you'll notice I add some dashes initially. I'll be removing them in a second because that's not how it works. They should get added automatically, and if we add them like this, it just will be one long string. So I'll remove the dashes and add the commas. And once that's all done, we should be able to click the Save the Recipe button, and it should get added in the third column because all recipes originally start in that list. and you'll just see. 1 second. So I'll be adding commas here, removing the dashes. Okay, time to click save. There's our recipe. Clicking it adds it to this week's list. That's all nice. Okay, add the ingredients to the shopping list and removing it again. So just to show that it works both ways. And then there are our ingredients. I hope you enjoyed this. It was a first for me and very stressful to make because I had no experience with making videos or writing blog articles whatsoever. I'll think I'll do this again in the future. If you're interested, click like, subscribe, or just send me an email with questions. Thanks for watching.